chartered flight evacuating Malaysians from Dhaka safely arrives. US Secret Service Director resigns following failure to protect Trump. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching World Today with me, Daryl Baptist. We begin today's bulletin with some rather relieving news. The chartered flight under the directive of Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, carrying 123 Malaysians from Bangladesh, arrived in Kuala Lumpur safely on Tuesday evening. They arrived at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport, or KLIA, Terminal 2, at around 4:56 p.m. on AirAsia flight AK0076, which departed from Hazrat Shah Jalal International Airport in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Home Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin Nasution Ismail, Deputy Foreign Minister Datuk Muhammad Alamin and Deputy Higher Education Minister Datuk Mustafa Sakmud greeted the evacuated Malaysians upon arrival. The Home Minister stated some Malaysians chose to remain in Bangladesh as they were either students in their final year of studies or working there. The special flight departed from KLIA Terminal 2 at 7:30 a.m. yesterday on the evacuation mission. Student-led protests against quotas in government jobs in Bangladesh spiraled into violence last week, with at least 147 people killed. Bangladesh's top court subsequently agreed to scrap most quotas following clashes between protesters and security forces that prompted the government to shut down internet services, impose a curfew and deploy the army. In light of the recent tragedy in the United States, it comes as no surprise that US Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle resigned on Tuesday, a day after acknowledging that the agency had failed in its mission to prevent an assassination attempt against Donald Trump. Cheetle was facing bipartisan calls to step down after a 20-year-old gunman wounded the former Republican president at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on 13th July. Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, said the resignation is overdue. US President Joe Biden thanked Seattle for her nearly 3 decades in the Secret Service. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said that Secret Service Deputy Director Ronald Rao, a 24-year veteran of the agency, would serve as acting director until a replacement is named for Seattle. Cheetle appeared before a congressional committee on Monday and said the attack on Trump represented the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades. Both Republicans and Democrats called on Cheetle to resign during the tense House hearing. She drew the ire of lawmakers from both parties by refusing to provide specific details about the attack, citing the existence of multiple active investigations. Cheetle served as a Secret Service agent for 27 years before leaving in 2021 to become the head of security for PepsiCo in North America. She was named the head of the agency by Biden in 2022. More drama in the US Senate as Senator Bob Menendez resigned on Tuesday in the aftermath of his conviction on corruption charges, including bribery and acting as an agent for Egypt's government, bowing to pressure from fellow Democrats to give up the job.
All I humbly ask for in this moment,
Democratic New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy will appoint a replacement for Menendez, who has represented New Jersey in the Senate since 2006 and served as chairman of the influential Foreign Relations Committee before giving up that post after being charged last year. Menendez, 70, was found guilty on 16th July by a jury in Manhattan Federal Court on all 16 criminal counts he faced, also including obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and extortion after a 9-week trial. Menendez's resignation letter was read out on the Senate floor. The case centered on what prosecutors call bribery schemes, in which the senator and his wife Nadine Menendez accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, gold bars, and car and mortgage payments from 3 businessmen. In exchange, Menendez steered billions of dollars in U.S. aid to Egypt and tried to influence the criminal prosecutions of 2 of the businessmen. U.S. District Judge Sidney Stein has set Menendez's sentencing for 29th October, a week before the 5th November election, in which he is running as an independent in a bid for another 6-year term in the Senate. We now move on to our updates on Palestine, where dozens of people are sleeping on the steps and hallways outside Khan Yunis Nasser Hospital after Israel sent tanks back into the greater Khan Yunis area, as it claimed that the area had been used for renewed attacks by Hamas. Gaza medics said on Monday at least 70 Palestinians were killed by Israeli fire. The Palestinians were killed by tank salvos in the town of Bani Suhaila and other towns fringing the eastern side of Khan Yunis, with the area also bombarded from the air. The Gaza Health Ministry said the dead included several women and children, and that at least 200 other people had been wounded. The Gaza Ministry does not distinguish between militants and civilians in its death tallies. The Israeli military claimed that evacuation orders to the population in eastern Khan Yunis resulted from intelligence information indicating militants were firing rockets from those areas and Hamas was attempting to regroup. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi announces China firmly supports Palestinian factions to achieve internal reconciliation through dialogue and supports Palestine to achieve unity and to be recognized as an independent state. At China's invitation, senior representatives of 14 Palestinian factions held reconciliation talks from 21st to 23rd July. The foreign minister also attended the closing ceremony of the talks and witnessed the signing of the Beijing Declaration on ending division and strengthening Palestinian national unity by 14 Palestinian factions.
这是巴勒斯坦各派北京对话 最重要的共识就是致力于所有14个派别的大和解、大团结。最核心的成果就是明确巴解组织是巴勒斯坦人民的唯一合法代表。最突出的亮点就是围绕加沙战后治理、组建临时民族和解政府达成一致。 最强烈的呼吁就是要求根据联合国有关决议实现巴勒斯坦真正的独立建国。
As the conflict in Gaza continues to drag on, Wang articulated China's proposed 3-step approach to resolve the ongoing crisis. The first step is to promote a comprehensive, lasting and sustainable ceasefire in the Gaza Strip as soon as possible and ensure humanitarian assistance and relief access. The second step is to make joint efforts towards post-conflict governance of Gaza under the principle of Palestinians governing Palestine. While the third step is to promote Palestine to become a full member state of the United Nations and begin to implement a 2-state solution. The head of the Fatah delegation, Mahmoud al-Alul, and the head of the Hamas delegation, Musa Abu Marzouk, delivered remarks on behalf of the Palestinian. They stated their readiness to implement the consensus, strengthen unity among factions, advance reconciliation process, and work for an early solution to the question of Palestine. Over in Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday said his outgoing government will remain focused on the Olympic Games in a caretaker role until mid-August, after which he will look to appoint a new Prime Minister.
Ma volonté, c'est dès qu'on le pourra, de pouvoir constituer en effet un gouvernement, parce que le pays a besoin d'un gouvernement pour prendre les décisions, préparer un budget, prendre les décisions pour le pays. Et donc, de manière évidente jusqu'à la mi-août, on doit être concentré sur les Jeux. Et puis à partir de là, en fonction de l'avancée de ces discussions, ce sera ma responsabilité de nommer un Premier ministre ou une Première ministre et de lui confier la tâche de constituer un gouvernement et d'avoir le rassemblement le plus large qui lui permette d'agir et d'avoir la stabilité.
Donc,
Macron's comments come after France's leftist New Popular Front coalition, which won the largest number of parliament seats in elections, said it will propose financial crime specialist Lucie Castet as its candidate for Prime Minister to Macron. Asked for comment about Castet's candidacy, the president said the name of the Prime Minister mattered less than what majority he or she can obtain with the National Assembly. Macron, in his first interview since elections in early July, acknowledged that his centrist party had lost the vote, but he declined to comment on a leftist front proposal for a new prime minister. He ruled out resigning before his term ends. And now some news from Russia, where its lower house of parliament on Tuesday voted for legislation that would make it possible to outlaw any undesirable foreign organization. The law, which has already been used to prevent independent media and rights groups from operating in Russia, currently only covers foreign non-governmental organizations. However, the new draft legislation removes the word non-governmental, opening up the possibility that any foreign organization could be affected. The amended legislation also adds new wordings, saying it covers any foreign or international organization that is not part of the organs of state power of a foreign state, but whose founders or participants are state organs of a foreign country. One of the bill's authors, Vasily Piskayov, in comments to Russian media last month said British, German and Japanese organizations could fall under the new legislation. Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin said that the loophole in the current legislation must be removed. The undesirable status forces organizations to shut down in Russia and means Russians that work for, fund or collaborate with them can also be liable to prosecution. MPs have now passed the law in second and third reading, after which it needs to be signed off by the upper house of parliament and President Vladimir Putin. Coming up next, death tolls in Ethiopia's landslide jump to more than 200. Stay tuned. Sad news in Ethiopia, I'm afraid, as humanitarian agencies were scrambling Tuesday to send desperately needed aid to a remote area of southern Ethiopia, where a landslide has killed more than 200 people in the deadliest such disaster recorded in the Horn of Africa nation. So far, 148 men and 81 women are confirmed to have died after the disaster struck on Monday in the Kencho Shacha locality in the Gofa zone. 5 people had been pulled alive from the mud and were receiving treatment at medical facilities. It quoted local administrator Dagamawi Ayele as saying that most of the victims were buried after they went to help local residents hit by a first landslide following heavy rains. Dagamawi said among the victims were the locality's administrator, as well as teachers, health professionals, and agricultural professionals. The UN's Humanitarian Response Agency, OCHA, said more than 14,000 people had been affected in the hard-to-access area, which is roughly 450 kilometers from the capital, Addis Ababa, about a 10-hour drive. Ethiopia, the second most populous country in Africa, with around 120 million people, is highly vulnerable to climate disasters, including flooding and drought. Our hearts go out to the Ethiopian people. And now more news on our weather. Data from the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service showed that Sunday, 21st July, was the hottest day ever recorded. The global average surface air temperature on Sunday reached 17.09 degrees Celsius, slightly higher than the previous record set last July of 17.08 degrees Celsius, as heat waves scorched large swathes of the United States, Europe and Russia. Director of the Copernicus service, Carlo Buontempo, said it was possible Monday, Tuesday and even Wednesday this week could eclipse Sunday's record as heat waves continue to sizzle across the world. Last year saw 4 days in a row break the record from 3rd July through 6th July as climate change driven by the burning of fossil fuels drove extreme heat across the northern hemisphere.
We know that the global mean temperature record typically happens in July, either in July or early August, and this is because we have most of the land mass in the northern hemisphere, so the northern hemisphere summer you tend to reach a higher value. And having high value over land mass is basically the recipe or one of the elements that characterize the heat wave. So we see this very high value once more in the ocean, because also the ocean is very close to record temperature, and we've been in record temperature for several months in a row now, but also over land, especially in the northern hemisphere. So there is a connection between.
Every month since June 2023 has now ranked as the planet's hottest since records began, compared with the corresponding month in previous years. Scientists and environmental advocates have long called for global leaders and wealthier countries to phase out and end the reliance on fossil fuels to prevent catastrophic effects of climate change, including increased heat waves. From heat waves to heavy rains, Typhoon Gaemi and a southwest monsoon brought heavy rain on Wednesday to the Philippine capital region and northern provinces, prompting authorities to halt work and classes, while stock and foreign exchange trading were also suspended. The presidential office suspended classes at all academic levels and work in most government offices, which is composed of 16 cities and home to at least 13 million people, due to the tropical storm. According to Philippines State Weather Agency, Gaemi, with maximum sustained winds of 155 kilometers per hour, was heading towards Taiwan. The agency added the typhoon did not make landfall, but it is enhancing a southwest monsoon, resulting in heavy to intense rain in northern Philippines. Gaemi and another tropical storm, Prapiroon, hit southern Philippines and caused floods last week, resulting in 7 deaths. The Philippines sees an average of 20 tropical storms annually that cause floods and deadly landslides. Meanwhile, Taiwan cancelled some drills in its annual war games as Typhoon Gaemi barreled towards the island on Tuesday, expecting to bring heavy rains and strong winds when it makes landfall. The Hangquan exercises, which started Monday, are held every year across Taiwan to train its armed forces as China ramps up military pressure on the island. As Gaemi, currently categorized as a medium-strength typhoon, edged closer to Taiwan, the island's northeastern regions started seeing heavy rains, with the Central Weather Administration predicting landfall by late Wednesday. The authorities plan to evacuate more than 1,400 people from mountainous areas in the northeast of Taiwan by Tuesday evening, while Taiwanese airline EVA Air announced the cancellation of more than 20 departing flights from the international airport. Taiwan experiences frequent tropical storms from May to November, but experts say climate change has increased the intensity. Expanding on Taiwan's military exercise, Taiwan conducted an anti-landing live fire drill on the outlying island of Penghu on Wednesday, the 3rd day of its annual war game that has been partially impacted by the approaching Gaemi typhoon. This year, Han Kuang military exercise aims to be as close as possible to actual combat, with no script and simulating how to repel a Chinese attack. On the coast of Penghu Island, tanks roll down the dirt road while firing shots at flared targets on the ocean, with other soldiers taking position on mobile missiles and by the coast. Live fire drills will only take place on Taiwan's outlying islands, including Kinmen, Matsu, and Penghu, which sit nestled next to the Chinese coast and were the scene of on-off clashes during the height of the Cold War. China, which views democratically governed Taiwan as its territory, has been staging regular exercises around the island for 4 years to pressure Taipei to accept Beijing's claim of sovereignty, despite Taiwan's strong objections. Moving on to some business news. Alphabet, parent company of Google, beat second quarter revenues, or rather revenue estimates, on Tuesday, driven by a rise in digital advertising sales and a healthy demand for its cloud computing services. Its shares were barely changed in aftermarket trading after rising more than 30% this year. Advertising sales. Alphabet's chief revenue source rose 11% to $64.6 billion. Revenue grew 14% to $84.74 billion in the April to June period, compared with analysts' consensus estimate of $84.19 billion. Revenue from cloud computing services, a widely watched barometer for the health of enterprise technology spending, grew 28.8% to $10.35 billion, beating the expectation set by analysts at $10.16 billion. Despite heightened regulatory scrutiny, Google has been pursuing its largest acquisition ever, a roughly $23 billion buyout of cybersecurity firm Wiz. But Wiz told employees on Monday it was walking away from the deal and would instead pursue going public. Google also held talks to acquire customer relationship management firm HubSpot before walking away from it earlier this month. The deal would have turned Alphabet into a rival of Salesforce, Oracle, and others in that market. Sales for the Mountain View, California company's so-called other bets, including experimental projects, and its self-driving car unit, Waymo, rose 28% to $365 million. Ad sales in its YouTube division rose 13% to $8.67 billion. FIFA and European leagues filing complaints against FIFA for abusing its position. That and more in our sports segment. Well, aren't those just the cutest mascots you've ever seen? Welcome back. Two major bodies representing footballers and football clubs in Europe, FIFA Europe and the European leagues, are filing a complaint to the European Commission accusing FIFA of abusing its position. Football's world governing body has taken unilateral decisions, and its conduct infringes EU competition law and notably constitutes an abuse of dominance. They say FIFA's conduct with regards to the international match calendar has harmed the economic interests of national leagues and the welfare of players, and argue FIFA's role as a regulator and competition organizer is a conflict of interest. FIFA has been accused of a failure to consult over recent changes to the calendar, such as the introduction of a 32-team Club World Cup. The first edition of the expanded Club World Cup is set to take place in the United States in June and July next year, and 12 European clubs are due to feature. Many of the continent's leading players will therefore be obliged to participate at a time when they would otherwise have been afforded a long close season break, a year ahead of the expanded 48-team World Cup in North America. News on the Olympics. French security forces guarding sites set to be used in the Paris Olympics are intercepting an average of 6 drones per day. Prime Minister Gabriel Attal said it's important to remind people there's a ban on flying drones. Attal, during a visit to the event's drone defense hub at Vélizy-Villacoublay air base outside Paris, said systems are in place to allow the forces to quickly intercept drones and arrest the operators. He highlighted several incidents around the Olympic Village on Sunday. According to a member of Attal's team, the communications chief of the Brazilian delegation was apprehended over operating a drone. Stefan Groen, France's general in charge of air defense, said any unauthorized drone will be jammed. The defender's job is particularly tricky, as they must avoid the remote vehicles falling while a sporting event is underway. As well as drone defenses, other forms of anti-aircraft defense are in place around the Olympic sites. Around 18,000 French troops have been deployed to secure the Olympics, 11,000 of them in the Île-de-France region around Paris. In a French first, airspace in a 150-kilometer radius around Paris will be completely closed off on Friday evening during the opening ceremony. Britain Andy Murray, the first male player to capture 2 Olympic singles gold medals, on Tuesday said that the tennis competition at the Paris Games will be the final event of his glittering career before retirement. Murray, widely regarded as one of Britain's all-time greatest sportsmen, won gold in London 2012, beating Roger Federer in the final and successfully defended his title in Rio 4 years later. The injury-plagued 37-year-old, who in 2013 ended a 77-year wait for a British men's singles champion at Wimbledon and won the trophy again in 2016, had previously said he was unlikely to continue his career beyond this year. Murray received a star-studded emotional farewell earlier this month at Wimbledon, the venue where he won 2 of his 3 major titles, following a first-round doubles defeat, partnering his brother Jamie. The Scot, who had surgery on 22nd June to remove a spinal cyst, which was compressing his nerves and made him lose control and power in his right leg, had decided he was not fit enough for the demands of singles competition at the All England Club. The tennis competition at the Olympics begins on the 27th of July, and Murray, who made his Olympic debut in Beijing 2008, will play in both singles and doubles in his 5th and final games. Murray resurrected his career after having hip resurfacing surgery in 2019, but has struggled to make the latter stages of leading tournaments since, and endured an ankle injury earlier this season. And that wraps up this afternoon's bulletin. Our top story for today: flight carrying evacuated Malaysians from Dhaka safely arrives in KLIA. Do join us again this evening at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM for more news. Alternatively, you can also stream us online on RTM Click's website and mobile app. Till then, I'm Daryl Baptist. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you for watching. Now it's back to you, wherever you may be. Goodbye.